Annyeong! Welcome to Dollightful! It's time for more steampunk! That's right, Titanium is getting a comrade today. But that's not all. There's loads of steampunk dollies coming your way because this is a collaboration. It's gonna be great! There's Anastasia Custom, Doll's brand new look, Hextian, Moonlight Jewel, Doll Mill, and Doll Motions videos to look forward to after this. Yay! But more about that later. For now, let's jump right in. I begin with a little concept art. For my first sketches, I drew up a younger steampunk schoolgirl-looking character. There are things I like the gear hairbands, but overall this is pretty uninspired. Catgirl was kind of cute too, but looks more like a Vocaloid than a steampunk character, so she got scrapped. Inspiration finally struck when considering a mashup. Korean Joseon Dynasty meets steampunk. I know, I draw a lot of inspiration from Korea, and my last steampunk dude was Asian, but what can I say? Korea gets my creativity running. Plus this way she'll match Thai, so it'll all work out. I'll be using GG Grant from Monster High. Now obviously I love to customize dolls, but I'm also a huge fan of the original Monster High ghouls, and I always considered GG a particularly neat doll. I believe the sculptors were aiming for a scorpion carapace looking body, which will play nicely into my design. And of course, it's well known that GG rocks the most killer nails at Monster High. First up, the hair's gotta go. I love this color and it's pretty long, so I'll save it this time. Snip off all the plugs close to the head with a sharp pair of scissors. Into the salvaged hair bag with you. We'll be making a wig this time, so there's no real need to take off the head. So to remove the rest of the hair, cut an incision through the back of the head to pluck out the remaining glue and hair. I've seen many other customizers doing this method recently, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. The neck peg inside gets in the way, so I ended up just chopping it shorter for easy access. Alright, that was pretty easy and we got all the glue out. Next we gotta take off her factory paint using pure acetone. Fishing out the paint from the lip crease can be kind of tricky, but just get in there with your fingernail. Wash the face with soap and water to dispel any remaining acetone. I find wigs lay flatter against the head when dolls don't have ears, so as much as I love the pointy ears, they've gotta go. Airbrush time! When I was rummaging around looking for a good doll to use for this project, Gigi caught my eye because of her scorpion skin that I mentioned earlier. She looks segmented, and it occurred to me that if we paint her the right way, she could look reminiscent of a porcelain ball-jointed style doll. When I think steampunk, I think 1800s, so dolls were definitely made of porcelain back then. All the materials I use are listed below in the description box as always if you're curious. I didn't remove her head, but I did pop it up off the base so that I could cover that area. Here she is before and after. I think she looks great in this color. Taking a liquid matte varnish, I give it a shake, mix it with water, and give the whole doll 2 coats of the stuff. This will make sure the paint doesn't scratch off, although scratching and peeling is to be expected around the joints. It's just unavoidable. Luckily, this doll is pink underneath, so some paint loss around the joints shouldn't clash too badly with her new color. Next, we're going to get out our pastels and do something called blushing. Basically, you add soft, subtle gradients of color to the doll. Adding it mostly around the joints is a good rule of thumb in my opinion. I'm using a sherbet orange color and light pinks. It makes the doll feel more wholesome and alive almost. I love blushing because it's really easy and fun, but always ends up looking good. When you're satisfied with the amount of blushing, seal the doll with MSC. It should keep the pastel in check and turn the skin to a matte texture. I am very pleased with how the body looks. I think it's the best blushing I've done yet on a doll. She seems more porcelain-esque, and it's a really lovely color on Gigi. Can you tell I'm proud of this? Face-up time! I protect the body with some packing material, and get to work. Gigi's facial mold doesn't look Asian in the slightest, but I'm stubbornly giving her Korean eyes anyway. With a couple photos of Korean ladies on my laptop, which I'm referencing off-screen, I start sketching in the shapes with a light brown and filling in the lower waterline with a salmon pink color. Come in with more pastels to define color on the lips and eyeshadows. Tentatively dust on a light brown to gauge the positioning of the eyebrows. I find it easier to correct shapes at the pastel stage. You can come in with a kneaded eraser to carve things around. Once it's good enough, I sketch in fine hairs with a dark brown pencil. Next, I sketch in iris shapes. We're going for a forward-facing look this time. And with black, I darken the winged eyeliner among other shapes, like the tips of the eyebrows. I've been flubbing it pretty bad on the eyelashes for the past few dolls, so I'm going to try really hard to make them thin and delicate this time by taking it slow. I think they're better than last time. Are they better than last time? Help me, Raquel Clemente! There was a little paint bump from the airbrushing on her forehead, so I made it into a birthmark. Fill in the eyes a bit more. This was as far as I could go with my initial 2 layers of sealant on the face, which is better than the usual if I'm honest. But let's give her another spray and then continue. Taking watered down acrylic paints, I brighten up the sclera and add highlights around the eye's corners, under the eyebrows, and right on top of the cupid's bow. Now let's get fancy with some metallic copper paint. Dabbing on each segment separately and then connecting them all with a thin line around the pupil, we form a gear shape. Mine got a little blotchy in some areas, so I touched it up with black paint. Papa Natalier does these rectangular eye shines, and it looks great on her dolls, so I wanted to try something new for myself. But I didn't like it. Back to my tried and true plain white dots. The gears are a little difficult to see, so using a very light orange, highlight the edges of them to set them apart from the black background of her iris. After a final spray of sealant, gloss up the eyes and lips with varnish. Ooh, it really brings out the metallic paint. Why is it so much fun to make things shiny? Next step is the hair. I've got some potential candidates here. I usually go straight for the bright, unnatural colors, but this time I tell myself, no, Catherine, you've got loads of beautiful brown hair. You need to make a normal colored doll for once. Steampunk is supposed to be about rusty browns and bronze and leather. That's what I kept telling myself. Interestingly, her face-up works well with a lot of different colors and shades. The fun part about making it a wig is that I could change up her hair in the future if I feel like giving her something else. So I liked all of these, but decided to go with this. This is actually a Claudine Wolf doll's hair, which I salvaged from making Iggy. It made a cute, shaggy, short hairdo. And if you'd like full detail on how to sew a wig from loose hair to finished product, I've got a whole other video you can check out later. I will say that because I was working with shorter hair, it was way more manageable, and I sewed everything together without using tape, which is awesome. It's always ideal to produce less waste when you craft, you know? Speaking of which, let's make her main accessory, the Steampunk bunny mask. Let's begin by sketching out the design life-size onto paper. A blueprint, if you will, to reference as we construct it. Depending on what materials I can scrounge up, things might change a little, but hopefully it'll be close. I want to make this out of aluminum cans so that it will be both lightweight and look appropriate. However, I don't have any cans in the house right now, and it's not recycling day. Well, I live in a city. It shouldn't be too hard to find one. I'll be right back. I found a couple cans actually, and of course washed them all with soap and water. You just have to make sure you're safe around the sharp edges when cutting cans. This looks perfect! I was hoping this beer can would be gold on the inside as well, so that I could get that half and half look on my mask, but alas, it's just silver in there. Oh well. I straighten the can out into a more manageable sheet, then start cutting, using my blueprint for scale. I cut a rectangle about the size of her head, cut a slit into the middle, and overlap the two sides to form a convex curve. Then trim it into a guitar pick shape. To join pieces together, I punch a hole through the material and join them with miniature fasteners. I've since lost the original packaging, but I'm pretty sure these are Holtz Idea-Ology mini-fasteners that I bought at either a Hobby Lobby or Michael's in America. They've really come in handy for doll projects like this, so I hope they sell them where you live too. Fold down the edges of the mask with pliers to create a safer finished edge. Next up is the ears. I start with rectangles again and fine-tune the shape from there. Similarly to sewing, give yourself a seam allowance where you'll turn the metal under to form the edge. To form the elbow joint at the base of the ear, I cut a short slit, fold and pinch the shape at the end, and round the edges. Proceed to trim the ear shape and fold down the raw edges. I use the same technique to make the adjoining joint on the mask side, only it's a shorter rectangle. Two cylinders will make the goggles. And these tiny pieces will hold the straps on later. Looks promising! Let's join all the pieces together. My original design had one fastener holding on the earpiece, but two should be more stable. I think it ended up looking cooler than what I had planned on anyway. A small amount of epoxy glue should connect some of the smaller pieces. I use it to attach the temple pieces and a ring at the top there. The ears need something stronger than fasteners. Let's use screws and nuts. These were the tiniest ones I could find at my local hardware store. This was totally an accident, but look how this section that juts out stops the ear from overextending. That worked out nicely. It's looking great. I like the way it looks at this stage too because it resembles like medieval armor. For the glass inside the goggles, I want to use this iridescent fairy film. It's the same stuff I used in Glaceon's outfit and for Iggy's wings. I'm thinking this color will work nicely with the rest of the outfit's coloring. It shouldn't take much. I iron a couple sheets together, using baking paper as a shield between the iron. It's still semi-transparent, so to ensure it looks green inside, I paint the eyes for good measure. Connecting the film to the metal cylinders was tricky. I cut the film down until the circles fit perfectly inside the cylinders. I cut temporary foam pieces as well to hold them in place a couple millimeters behind the front of the goggle, so it'll have that beveled edge, you know? Not be flush against the end. I've heard about the power in a tube that is super glue, but I've never actually used super glue before. I thought I'd try it out here. I quickly learned this isn't the right situation to use such a runny substance. You know that cliche about don't super glue your fingers? Well, I immediately got glue on my fingers, and it felt really weird. Well, this is a part of me now. Within seconds, it spread to other fingers, even though I wasn't touching anything. Help. The weird part was, after it dried, I didn't have a sensation of touch in those fingers. I had to call in backup and clean the desk before proceeding again. Going for a similar approach, but with hot glue instead. It looks pretty icky, but this will be concealed on the inside. And it seems sturdy, which is the important part. A little more epoxy glue should keep these babies in place on the mask. I made some metal loops out of paper clips and attached a chain to the top. This will lay across the head and help it stay in place later. I love it in silver, but it needs to be copper to match the doll. 3 coats did the trick. Take a watered down black and let it seep into the crevices for an aged metal look. Scratch off the finish you just applied to make it look more weathered. Remove paint along areas that might feasibly get bumped or hit frequently for a more realistic effect, like along the edges and the protruding areas. Awesome! We just made this today, but it looks at least 20 years old. Mission accomplished? Time for clothes. I have a rough pattern of the hanbok I used a long time ago for Nari, so I have something to use as a base, but it needs some help. I wasn't as careful with my patterns back then, I guess. I sketched up a new pattern with curved sleeves that bell out and shortened the skirt pattern I had too. It took 2 prototypes and much rewriting of instructions until I got it right. Finally, I was ready to make the real deal. To be honest, I found this tiny striped fabric months ago at my craft store and knew that it would translate perfectly into doll-sized hanbok sleeves, so I've been waiting for the right opportunity to use this. They say you shouldn't sew over pins, but you need them to hold tiny pattern pieces in place or everything just flies apart, so take it real slow and use the hand crank a lot if you have to. And I found lifting the foot every now and then to turn the corners and whatnot is really useful. And of course, this can all be sewn by hand as well. Another trick I do for every article of doll clothing is to tie the loose ends of the threads together. It's not worth the hassle on normal size clothes, but just a couple millimeters of unraveling on a doll's garment can mean disaster, so tie them down. The collar of the chokori always gives me problems. It always wants to pop up away from the neckline, so here's how I handle that. I cut a long strip of contrasting fabric, a ribbon would also work, and hand stitch it all the way around to make sure it's accurate. Try it on the doll, then take 2 darts, one on either side of the neck. It's by no means an elegant solution, but at least it lays flat. If any of you have figured out a prettier way to solve this neckline problem, please let me know in the comments. My concept calls for a brown skirt, but I don't have quite the right color. None of my browns seem to work with the copper mask. So I thought I'd pick up the green in the sleeves and use this fabric for the skirt portion. It was looking promising, but this stuff was really springy. I tried to force some wrinkles and gathering, but it came out frumpy. And too small. I want the skirt to look fuller. So beans to that skirt, and let's try again. There we go. How do you like attempt number 2? This is actually the wrong side of some faux leather fabric I have. I think it'll work. The edge doesn't fray either, so the gear-shaped hemline was easy to cut out. We can make it further match the mask by painting copper along the hem to accentuate the gear design. Somehow covering surfaces in shiny metallic paint is therapeutic. The norike is assembled from craft store gears, a bottle I filled with glitter, a pink twine tassel, and embroidery threads to hold it all together. The socks are cotton with no stretch, so I made the pattern larger to ensure it would still slip over the doll's heels. These were originally Claudia Wolf's shoes, which means they're the big sister foot size. That's perfect because it means they're large enough to fit comfortably over the socks. I paint them black first, then come in with the copper once again. I also decided to seal these guys because they'll be scuffing against the ground a lot, so it could use the extra protection. To solidify the bunny theme, I made some puff balls out of yarn. Just tie a couple strands together in the middle and fluff it out with a pet comb. The 2 small puffs go on her shoes, and the big one will go behind her head where the mask ties together. As a last-minute touch, I painted mint green into the crevices of the copper parts. This was suggested to me by my husband to make it look more aged and oxidized. I think he was right. Looks great. That's it for the clothes. It took a couple tries, but we got there. And we did it all without any feeling in several fingertips. Thanks, Super Glue. She's not done yet, though. I was waiting for LEDs and electronic supplies in the mail. I should really order supplies earlier when making these videos. Last time I used LEDs, it was under the expert guidance of my dad. I'm flying solo this time, and I'd be lying if I said I had a solid understanding of everything, but I did my best and modeled this circuit exactly like the one I made for Xerneas. At first, I tried to make a series circuit because that would have laid much flatter inside the mask, but the second LED wouldn't light. So I reconstructed it into a parallel circuit. The battery is slightly unsightly, but that's where the puffball comes into play. Sealing away all the fragile bits is the last step. I epoxy glue black fabric on top of the wires, and painted the back of the ears black to match. And with that, she's ready for final assembly. It was difficult to match the puntastic nature of Titanium's name, but the name Irene Oxide isn't bad. I like how when the mask is down over her face, it looks equally spooky and derpy. I think it's because the eyes aren't looking straight forward but off at an angle. It gives her this innocent demeanor. Thank you so much for joining me to make Irene Oxide. I think Ty will enjoy having a steampunk partner in crime. Just like Ty, she was inspired by several unrelated topics and things, but came together cohesively in the end, I think. And don't forget, there's more! Make sure to check out all my friends' videos to see how we each interpreted the steampunk theme into our own unique custom dolls. If you're familiar with these artists already, I bet you can tell who made which doll just by looking at the group shot. Can you? Stay artsy! Annyeong! 재밌었어?